use float. So now you're going to do the same thing with your math score and science score. We make a math variable, make it into a float, and the input would be from what is your math score. And lastly, we have one for science. It's also a float because it's a decimal. We put input, what is your science score? And you can see here we have 5 different questions, just like the problem wants us to do. And then we're going to have 5 different inputs to use. Okay, so now that we did all of this, we want to output our report card. First, you want to print report card. That way, when it's outputted, the users will know that it's the beginning of their report card. Next, you list name, grade, and then all of your different scores. Let's start with name. You can say print name plus string of name. So when we asked in this first line, we said, what is your name? And then our name was stored into the name variable. So now in line 8, we're using that variable and we just print out the name. Next, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we want to print their grade. In order to do that, we'll put grade plus string of their grade. This is going to print out whatever their grade input was. So in this case, you can see they answered 12. So in the end, it outputs 12. And then English, math, and science, they're all floats. You need to make sure you change it into a string. So first, we want to have English score, math score, and then your science score. English score plus English. So when you name your variables, you want to make sure that it's going to be easy for you to know what it represents. So like we said before, they're basically containers, and if I name this something else like X, maybe later I'm going to get confused what the variable is. So instead, I named it English. That way I know that it's the English score. So next we're going to do math score. And then the same thing, but instead of saying English, we put math. Okay. And then we're also going to do a science score. Again, I just took the science variable and then I made sure that it's printing out as a string. And before that, I said science score so that we know what kind of score it is. There's one more part of this that we didn't do yet. It's the average. So the average is just going to be these 3 scores here added up, and then you divide it by 3 because there's only 3 scores. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a new variable. I want to call it average is going to be equal to English plus math plus science. So as you guys probably know, in order to take the average, you add all of the scores and then you divide by the number of scores. So in this case, we have 3 scores. I already added them. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to divide it. there's several ways you can do this, but I'll show you one of them first. So you can say average equals average divided by 3. Um, what I'm doing here is let's say that English, math, and science are both equal, all equal to 1. So then average would be equal to 3, right? And then if you do average divided by 3, you would get 1. So now in the average, you have a value of 1. If you want to do everything on one line, let me comment this out first. So if you want to do everything on one line, you can put your addition in parentheses and then divide it by 3. In Python, the order of operations for math is the same as your order of operations for normal math. So if I didn't put the parentheses, it's going to divide science by 3 first and then add it to the rest of them. So you want to make sure that you have parentheses like this. And either one of these way works. Just make sure that you only divide it by 3 one time. So I commented this line out so that my code ignores it when I press run. Okay. Now all you have to do at the end is you're going to print out average and then the value that you just calculated. So we're going to say print average plus string average. So anytime you guys have any number, you need to make sure that you change it to a string. And then I just put average in front of it so that you know it's the average of your scores. Okay, I'm going to press run now and test my code. What is your name? I'm going to input my name, my grade, and then your English score. You can put whatever you want. Your math score, and then your science score. Okay, so as you can see, once I inputted the last thing, so my science score, it started printing out report card, and then you can see that it has my name, my grade, English, math, science score, and then the average of those 3. So let me try to make this bigger, and then you guys can try it. Also, do any of you guys have questions? You can ask it in the chat if you do.
I just want to comment to print English score. So basically, you are converting this English float real number into a string. Okay. In a print parentheses, the whole thing is a string. So that's why the real number becomes a string, and they can concatenate it. So Hannah, I think you might want to show another way to score parentheses and just put English the value without converting to string. Yeah, without changing to string. You get it? There are software. There are many different. I don't know if they heard it. Harriet, do you understand what I just said? So they can do print English score, close the parentheses, comma, English. Then you will just print the float number without converting it to string. No?
That's the number of decimal places that I want to include. So here we have 2 decimal points. That's why I said 2, but you can change it if you want to. And then I'm just going to run it to test if it works. Okay, so now you can see here, this is the report card. And this time, instead of my average being a bunch of decimal points, it says 86.67. So the program automatically rounded the average for me. So yeah, if you guys want to round it, then you can try using this today. And basically, we want to make a receipt for a meal that we ate. So it says, it's just, this is what we're supposed to do. We need to make a receipt. And then we have two things. We have a tax and a tip. So these are some examples of what our code is going to look like. It says, what was the meal cost? That's what we're going to ask the user. Here, the blue part is input. So I input 50, and then we get these three kinds of information. First is the tax, and then the tip, and then the total. In order to calculate the tax, tip, and total, we need to make sure to use these percentages. Okay. So I'm going to start coding this in the online editor. Okay. So first we need to make a variable. I'm going to call it cost because it's going to be the cost of our meal. So cost equals input. And here it says, what was the meal cost? So that's what I'm going to say also. What was the meal cost? And as we can see, the input is always going to be an integer. So I'm going to cast it into an integer just by putting int. Okay, so now we have a variable called cost, and it has the cost of our meal. Okay, next we have a tax and a tip. I'm just going to write here so that I don't have to keep going back and forth. Tax is 8%. Tip is 15%. And from these, we need to calculate how much each one is going to be based on our meal cost. I'm going to make a variable called tax. This is going to calculate how much of our meal cost is going to be taxed. We can see it's 8% of the meal cost. So I'm just going to do as I would in normal math. It's 1.08 times the meal cost. So cost. And then here, I'm going to use something that we went over in the last one. It's round. So I want to say round. And then 2. So, oh, sorry, it's 1. 1. So as you can see in this example, all the time, wait, I'll just set it to 2. In some of these, it only has 1, but some of these it has 2, so I just put it to 2. So this one has 4.0 and 7.5. So even though maybe 8% of 50 is not going to be like a number that's rounded, so that's why I'm just doing this. And then tip. Okay. So for the tip, it's 15% of the entire meal. So 1.15 times the cost of your meal, and I rounded it to 2 decimal places in order to find the tip. So next we have a total. The total is just going to be your tax plus the tip plus the meal cost. So we can make a new one just called total. That's what I'm naming my variable. And it's going to be the cost plus tax plus tip. And these two variables here, they're already rounded to 2 decimal places, and then this one's an integer, so I know that this one's going to have 2 decimal places at most. So I don't need to use round for that one. And last, what we're going to do is print all of them, our tax, tip, and then total. So first, you print the tax plus tax, then your tip, and then you print the total. And then make sure here, you can either use string or like we said before, you can use a comma when it's a float. So, yeah, basically, I know that all 3 of these numbers are going to be a float because, first of all, I said round and it's going to have 2 decimal places. So it's definitely not going to be a whole number. And also, I multiplied it by 1.08. So when you multiply them by a decimal number, then it's automatically going to become a float. If, for example, I didn't multiply it by a decimal and I don't round it, then it would be an integer and I would need to change this to a string. But like we went over, when it's a float, you can just use a comma and then whatever your float is. So I'm gonna try this. Okay. All it asks is what was the meal cost. I put in 50. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. I put 1.15, but it's just 8% and 15% of your whole thing. So yeah, you don't need to put that. I'll try it. Okay, so now you can see that when it says what was the meal cost, I put in $50. It says the tax is $4, the tip is 7.5, and then in total you have 61.5. So it's the same as the example here. I can also try it with different numbers. So like 125. Then it's $10 tax, tip, and then your total. So every time you do it, it's gonna change. Okay. Also, make sure that when you guys do it, you see there's like green code right here. Those are my comments, and make sure you guys don't include comments in your code. These comments here, I only put there so that you guys can understand what each part of my code is doing. Yeah, so you guys can try it now. And then once you guys are done, let us know in chat. And also if you have any questions, you can let us know. So basically this problem just wants you to take in an integer and then you're going to multiply it and then make a times table. So this is what you're going to be printing. Okay. So the first thing you want to start with is your starting number. I'm just going to call it num because that's the number that we need to use. So num is going to be equal to your input, and we say type an integer. So here we just put type an integer. And then I'm going to change it to an int because we need to make sure that it's a whole number. This is a multiplication table for whole numbers only and not for decimals. Okay, so basically we're just going to go down the line and print out every single one but multiplied by a different number. So we can do it all in one line for each one. We can say print. We want to have our number first. So you can see that each line starts with 4 no matter what the rest of the line is. So I'm going to say num plus, and then we want an x to represent our multiplication symbol. and we start with 2. So 4 times 2 equals, and then we're going to have some kind of multiplied number. So in this case, it's 4 times 2. So in my case, it's going to be num times 2. I'm going to put in parentheses, num times 2. And then the last thing we need to do is you need to make sure that you change it to a string. In our last problem, we did not use string because we were working with decimals, but this time it's a whole number. So we need to change it to a string. I'm just going to test this one line first. We type an integer 4, and you can see it prints out 4 times 2 equals 8. So I'm just gonna keep doing the same thing, except multiply by 3, 4, 5, and so on until 9. So you guys can start trying this on your own. I'm just going to fill in the rest. So yeah, for this one, I still have string num, but instead of saying times 2, I'm saying times 3 right now. So times 3 and then str num times 3. Okay, and then you guys can just keep going. Just change the 2, 3, and so on into numbers up until 9. And if you guys have questions, you can put it in the chat.
So I think our time is almost over. So today's homework is going to be finishing all the problems we did with Hannah today. And I'll also have more problems, just like the ones we did with Hannah, but new problems. And I'll send them in the homework channel right now so that you guys can go ahead and get started with it. So you guys can do as the same thing you've been doing, and this time you can try to solve the new problems on your own. Okay, I just uploaded them onto the homework channel so you guys can click on the problems. And we did up to multiplication table together. So you guys can try calculator and area of a circle by yourselves. And if you didn't finish any of the other ones while we were doing it, you can finish it as homework as well.
Okay.
And like always, if you guys have any questions while doing the homework, you can also ask in the homework help channel or in your class channels as well. If you have any questions or problems while you're trying to solve the problems that we gave you. Otherwise, I think we're done for today. And yeah. See you guys tomorrow. Thanks for coming again.